The webinar has started.
Thank you, Naomi, and welcome to our regular monthly meeting of King County Regional Homeless Authority Implementation Board. Just a little housekeeping before we start. Lamont Green is sitting in for Sarah Rankin. And say hi, Lamont. Lamont, do you want to introduce yourself to the panel?
Hello, everyone. Good to see you all again. Lamont Green, he, him pronouns.
I'll start off with the theory of change. If we create a homeless response system that centers customers, those people who are homeless, the voice of those who are with lived experience of homelessness, we then will be better able to focus on responding to the needs and eliminating inequities in order to end homelessness for all. And I think it's important to read that today, just so we can center ourselves that we have voices in the room that have lived experience. I'm one that was homeless for 13 years, home then homeless, and now homed again. But it's important that we recognize the nuances that we bring to the table and into the planning of this. The land acknowledgement will be done by Sarah Bello. Sarah, I forgot to see if you were here. Are you here? Sarah Bello.
And she is here.
Sarah is here.
She's here?
Yeah, she is here. I believe she might need to be promoted, Chair. Naomi, can you please promote?
Yes, I'm promoting her at this time.
Thank you.
Sarah, you should be promoted to panelist at this time.
Awesome. Hello. Thank you, Harold, for inviting me. Oh, let's join so you can see me on camera.
Sarah, you might have to speak up just a little bit.
I'm here. Thank you all for a little patience as I join you virtually. Good to see you all. Ani, Harold, can I start, or would you like to say anything else? We good, Harold?
I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Okay. 1 second. How's this?
That's better. I can
Awesome.
see you.
Thanks for doing a little tech with me, tech check. Awesome. Well, I'll kind of go over Ani, Buju. Hello, everybody. My name's Sarah Ballou. My people are from Michigan and Indiana. I'm a member and an enrolled member of the Pokagon Band of Potawatomi Nation, home to the Great Lakes. And I'm really honored to be here to speak and model what land acknowledgement means to me as a Native person who is a guest on Coast Salish land. The Coast Salish people I am greatly honored to be on this land and be in relationship with many who call this land home. And I just wanted to share a few reflections because, starting out with my full introduction is a very important thing for me as a Native person. So I'll briefly share that and then go into a little bit of my thoughts. But Ani Wawasquaneque Nadishnakas Mako Dorum Borowatomi Ojibwe Mount Pleasant in Donjaba. I said that I'm from the Bear Clan. I am an Anishinaabe. I have roles in my community from the Great Lakes, and I bring that all with me here to this land to work. And I want to speak to why that's important for me. Land acknowledgements to me goes beyond, recognizing treaties and territory mapping, which I think gets a little trendy or really shows up in government spaces around, that's as far as it goes. And as an Anishinaabe, as a guest on Coast Salish people lands, I most importantly learn from and uplift the indigenous knowledge systems that have survived thousands of years here and that are very connected to place. I also know my own value in holding knowledge systems that have survived thousands of years from the Great Lakes. And first and foremost, uplifting the Indigenous knowledge systems from here and how that benefits community engagement, how that benefits policy, how that benefits everyone in terms of natural resource management. And secondly, knowing my inherent value carrying these knowledge systems as well from my Potawatomi and Ojibwe people, my tribes, I trade with that knowledge. There is a protocol, there's a role for me as a guest here to trade and represent these. And so I just wanted to share two quotes, but one from Owen Oliver, who is Quinault and a part of the Coast Salish people here. He actually has an Indigenous walking tour for the University of Washington, if you're ever on campus. And it goes through the places on campus that are really connected to the people here. And he says, specifically, Indigenous knowledge systems and how they are grounded in place is especially important as these systems are not sprinkled around like many visitors and guests to the land can view these. These knowledge systems are rooted in the natural landscape that ties language and sacred history into what we call place. Place of the First Peoples has been intentionally and continuously entangled with colonial assimilation and destruction. And what few people explain, though, is how resilient these Indigenous knowledge systems are. Ultimately, forgetting to showcase how these Indigenous communities take action and responsibility to prune out historical disenfranchisement. And I wanted to uplift that and share one quote from my people, the Potawatomi, sharing one of my knowledge systems I uphold. And it's from Robin Wall Kimmerer from her book, Braiding Sweetgrass. And it states, our human relationship with strawberries is transformed by our choice of perspective. It is a human perception that makes the world a gift. When we view the world this way, strawberries and humans alike are transformed, and the relationship of gratitude and reciprocity thus developed can increase the evolutionary fitness of both plant and animal. And that I wanted to share that to honor all beings of life, plant, animal, human, and knowing that gratitude, that gifting, that reciprocity transcends a lot of knowledge systems that both Indigenous peoples and all the communities you come from, you have that inherently in you as well. So Miigwech, thank you. I'm happy to be here. I'm going to be listening in, and it's been a joy to get to know Harold. So thank you for inviting me, Harold.
Sarah, stay right there and ponder this question. How does it feel to have people speak for you? Like I speak for Indigenous people. It's been going on long. You just ponder that question for a moment. I'll let you answer that because I've done a blunder here. First of all, I didn't start the meeting correctly. Just want to warn people that this is a Zoom meeting. The audience is reminded that anything you say or anything that's verbal, written, or anything in the chat becomes public record. We ask board members only to raise their hand when they need to speak. We have interaction going on both ways, so don't let the chairs hold up everything. Just raise your hand and we'll call on you. And that's just a reminder. And Naomi, I'm going to call this meeting to order. If you could please take roll.
Will do. Thank you, Harold.
Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate it.
Carrie Anderson.
Present.
Nate Caminos.
Present.
Paula Carvalho.
Here.
John Chelmanack.
Here.
Lamont Green.
Here on behalf of Sarah Rankin.
Gordon McHenry.
Present.
Harold Odom.
Here.
Damian Petnaugh.
Here.
Adrian Quinn.
Here.
Michael Ramos.
Here.
Simha Reddy.
Here.
Juanita Spotted Elk.
Present.
Chair, we have quorum with 12 members present.
Thank you, Naomi. So Sarah, I'll give you a couple more minutes. If you can answer that question for us in the most genuine way you can. Be blunt.
Thanks for the question. I am, I'm thinking of examples where this has happened. And I think when people speak for, and what the term Indigenous is so large, and is actually, that can be talked about in many ways. So when folks are saying, talking on behalf of Indigenous communities, being specific with tribes, being specific with what relationships you're pulling and uplifting, it's not that a non-native can never talk about things that they learn in relationship with natives and native people and the Indigenous peoples anywhere. But it is the fact of having trusted relationships and knowing the protocols to be able to share the knowledge you're gifted with from them. But speaking on behalf of Indigenous peoples, that isn't a monolith. That's a huge kind of descriptor. And I personally haven't had too many examples really with that, because every time that the issues or solutions for Native peoples, designed by Native peoples, and influenced by tribes, there's always that process should be led by those Native people. And yeah, when the spaces are created by tribes and upheld by and facilitated by Native people, I tend to not see people speaking on behalf of a group that they aren't a part of. So when people are in the room, Native people specifically, and they're convening that space, that is also a great way to bring it back to, this is rooted in relationship, it's rooted in who you're connected with, and not speaking on behalf of people that you aren't culturally or a member of. So yeah, thanks for the question, Harold. I'm thankful enough that I haven't been in many of those spaces.
Thank you, sir. No, you answered that quite fine. It was the point. Sarah and I are in the Puget Sound Community Leadership Fellows, and I've heard her speak a couple of times, and it's bringing people to the table and in the planning stage to let them speak for themselves and let their voices be heard. So thank you, Sarah, for that very much. I'm going to turn it over to Semi for consent decree.
Thank you so much for that. Really appreciate it. In just a moment, we will, I just want to notify the public, in just a moment, we will open up for public comment. We'll start actually in just 2:20. If you'd like to provide verbal comments, go ahead and type your name and city where you're calling into the chat. That chat is open and will stay open until the public comment section of the agenda closes. In addition, you may also use the chat box to provide written comment to the board from now until the public comment section of the agenda closes. The next item, we have a fairly packed agenda today with a number of reports from, we'll start with the CA reports from Mark. We will have a review of some policies that need updating, and then subsequently a number of reports from various CRHA staff members. We will do our best to move efficiently and briskly through these, but I do want to make sure and highlight that we will take the time needed to answer any questions from the implementation board and have good, robust discussion. We are going to hold off on approving the March meeting minutes, as we did not have them in sufficient time to review. So I'll ask that our board be willing to review those and approve them for the June meeting, or approve both March and April at the next meeting in May. So I will now open up for public comment. So we have 10 minutes for public comment. If you wish to comment and haven't done so already, please go ahead and put your name and city in the chat box. Each individual will be given 2 minutes to comment. and will be unmuted and called on in the order that the names were entered into the chat. When you reach the end of the 2 minutes, we'll ask you to finish your comments so that others may speak as well. All right, I will close the public comment 10 minutes from now. Public comment is now open. We have one person signed up so far.
Simha, I see Bill first, so I will go ahead, Bill, and promote you.
Bill, glad to have you.
Greetings to all of you. Lamont, good to see you there for Sarah. Thanks for all your work. Given that you heard a report last month on vehicle residency, I want to comment on how that intersects with another current item. I was at Lehigh's Cottage project at Sandpoint, groundbreaking yesterday, and I was reminded that there seems to be still a bit of a feud between tiny houses and RHA. I don't know how strong that remains, but I just would like to say of those vehicle residents that we talk to and who give us an answer, and we do ask what they'd like next, I'd say about 3/4 of the ones we talk to actually say that they want to go to a tiny house. Now, that might end up being about 20% of everybody we see, so this is not science. I doubted that that was a generous pathway to give them, but at the same time, I just remembered a few things about tiny houses. Number one, that they bring safety that is not present on the street. They bring community that is not present on the street. And they're an entry to the system, which we don't have for people on the street until we do HMIS with them. And then they're still on the street. All these are absent on the street. For the valid complaints that exist about tiny houses, and I know there are some, let's solve them. None of us can afford household fights. And I think that's what this is, because I hear it everywhere. We need every option where options remain too few. Those in homelessness will surprise us as they seek safety. They have surprised me. They seek safety, community, and pathways to stability. So I would like to see us all on board with every option. The cottages are going to be great. I've been pushing for that mid-level structure, and we need to see more of that. And I know RHA isn't doing the housing, but frankly, people on the streets are impacted by 38 bullets in their vehicles, BB gun in their vehicles. It is a war zone. So we need help and we need to be partners. Thanks.
Thank you, Bill. Appreciate the comment. Is there anyone else in the community that would like to sign up for comment or share your comment via chat? I'm going to intentionally let this sit for a moment, so if anyone in the community feels hesitant or shy, would you feel comfortable coming and sharing comments? Well, wonderful. Bill, thank you for the comments, and seeing no further public comment signups, I'm going to close public comment at this time. However, if you wish to continue, if you wish to provide written commentary, please go ahead and do so for the next 10 minutes or 8 minutes in the chat. All right, let's turn it over to Mark. Mark, if you can share with us your CEO report now.
Sure, happy to do so. Again, for the board and also for the public, I apologize. I'm at a series of conferences this week, so I'm not in my usual location, and I will have to step away after this report, but you're in capable hands with the rest of the team. Briefly, the substance of what I want to go through today is primarily around budget timeline and responding to some requests from this board and other folks to modify that timeline. So I'll start there. And Naomi, could you please share the slide? Thank you. So we can just dive right in. The initial budget timeline that you all are aware of would have had the submittal of the budget essentially next week. This was stipulated in contract with the city and in just conversation with the county. We had a county submittal deadline of April 22nd, a city submittal deadline of May 25th. And what you can see is, in addition to that creating incredibly tight turnaround times that I had the opportunity to discuss with the chairs and to some degree with the broader executive committee, it also landed square in the middle of a whole bunch of work that we're doing. And in particular, our unsheltered engagement work, right, which is our modified point in time count, which you'll hear from Daniil and Owen about later in this meeting. The analysis for that is really, we'll submit to HUD at the end of April, but like in terms of like what we can learn from all of the oral histories that we collected and all the people that we engage with, there's more to know. Our service redesign community engagement work is ongoing. There is some participatory budgeting work that has happened. There's and where budget development would have happened would be next week. We would submit it, and then we would have come straight back to approve it with little time for deliberation or conversation. And it also would have required a special meeting of the governing committee to approve it. And we would have had to do this sort of every year. And what I discussed with the chairs and also with the team is that, while this represents this year's calendar, this is going to happen every year, right? Like every year there will be some forms of community engagement, point in time work, HIC work, right? Those things just happen. And so we really needed to think about how to shift the budget timeline to something that was going to be sustainable and actually allow time for proper deliberation and vetting by this oversight body so that you all could just actually take a vote as opposed to, just getting hand waving from staff that it was okay and you should approve it, right? And I don't think anyone felt good about that. Next slide, please. I will note just again that like the baseline issue that was driving this behavior is that the authority was being treated as a city or county department. And so the logic that the city and the county had to some degree for some of those dates was how it folded into some of their other internal timelines, right? And what we are still, sort of have our training wheels on around is identifying what processes and timelines the authority needs to operate on in relationship to our funding jurisdiction, but also recognizing, and this I think, I want to lift up and just, make sure it's very clear for the public, right? That like, you are our oversight. and so while we need to, of course, manage things in relationship to those jurisdictional needs and want to be good partners, we also need to ensure that the oversight that is legislatively established for this agency is the primary vehicle that we understand as staff for where we are deriving our direction, where we are, having the right conversations about what is needed to ensure that we are appropriately stewarding public dollars. Next slide. The revised timeline has us submitting budget at the end of May and in the first week of June as transmission to the city and the county, with the votes happening at the regularly scheduled June meetings. The June submission that we'll do will be labeled as draft, subject to approval at the meeting that will follow the next week. I think for a couple reasons, this is the appropriate compromise space. One, we'll be able to talk about the budget development, what's going into it for the duration of the spring every year, right? And so, beginning now, actually, the executive committee and Damien as the treasurer, we'll start getting information from us and requests for how do you want to receive this information? Is it in memo? Is it in briefing? So that you all have access to the appropriate materials leading into that submittal. The other issue that we're working against and looking to create the appropriate compromise container around is that the governing committee, you all meet monthly, the governing committee established their calendar for the year as meeting the once in the last month of each quarter, right? So they have these quarterly meetings, and what we were really trying to get out of was mini special meetings for the governing committee that caused a lot of consternation from a scheduling perspective and from a getting all the materials bundled, et cetera. And so the regularly scheduled meeting is in June. The other regularly scheduled meeting is in March, and there is simply no reality where there will ever be a budget that has been appropriately vetted, has the appropriate input, that is prepared by essentially late January to be given the right amount of scrutiny for a March vote. So we're looking at that the regularly scheduled June meetings as when the votes will happen moving forward. Next slide. Again, I mentioned this, but the driving factors here are really about community engagement and wanting to make sure that all the right data is always included in how we do the budgeting. Next slide. And then I want to also just zoom out briefly and contextualize this specifically for 2022. So in this year, we're also in the process of doing our legislatively required 5-year planning. What I've asked is for the 5-year plan, including its sub-regional components, to be concluded for internal review, inclusive of the board, in August. And then we will affirm it, barring any issues, in September, in alignment with our legislative requirements. What I've also done is asked for the team to, in connection with the 5-year plan, to also do budget projection aligned with that planning for the next actually 6 years, so that it's truly biennial. And so what that means is that we will begin every year with a placeholder number generated this year, right? And over the course of the spring, we'll update it with the latest data. What are we seeing in the trends? What's working? What's not working? What are we hearing from our provider partners? What are we hearing from folks experiencing homelessness? And then when we make shifts, the shifts should either be in programmatic intensity, right? We want to put more money on our emergency housing and less on our shelter, or more money on our behavioral health continuum support and partnership with Be Heard, or whatever it may be, as opposed to an overall number. So that again, it's saying we want to actually have a higher intensity here and a lower intensity here based on what we're hearing, but the number itself shouldn't shift dramatically in terms of the funding request. And more broadly, what I would say is that, if there is a shift in funding request, it should be it should be small, right? It should be, $5 million because we need to make some specific investments in South County, right? As opposed to $50 million or $100 million, and it is a surprise. The thing that the team and I were thinking a lot about in this structure was also looking, one, to take the surprise out of budgeting, right? Like, we have a lot of work to do. The budget can become a very political and a really, it can become very political. Our job is to de-risk and depoliticize as much of this agency's action as we can. And in doing budgeting in this way, what we essentially provide is that 6-year forecast to say, no surprises. Appropriators at city, county, other jurisdictions that join the ILA will not be surprised by, sort of what is going to happen in 2023, 24, 25, et cetera. And to be able to be clear, because the budget numbers are then in alignment with the planning about what the investment buys, right? And how we measure its success, et cetera. So we really feel that the movement to this multi-year forecasting and then the updating every year around the edges, so to speak, is going to be a much less contentious, much less, much more thoughtful way of doing the budgeting work. Next slide. The only other thing that I would use this slide just to emphasize is that while the plan will be for 5 years in terms of stuff, we will do a 6-year budget projection, again, just to fully align with biennial budgeting so that the county and the city can slot that into their biennial planning, you know, as they need and whatever internal documents they need. I'm hopeful that this will work much better. I think, you know, I'm curious. Obviously, I've had an opportunity to speak about this with the chairs, but I'm curious if there are any thoughts from the rest of the board, and if you would like to affirm this as your way forward. So I'll pause there, and then I have one other update relevant to actually the RFP and the tiny home conversation that was part of public comment. But Naomi, you can drop the slide.
Right. So I had a question as well, but let's keep in order. Let's have Adrian and then Nate, please.
Thanks, Mark, for a good budget overview. I guess I want to raise a question and perhaps a caution for everyone. You know, I'm concerned that we might raise community expectations too high about what we are able to do and change with the money, knowing that at least the money from the county, having worked on that budget before, is the money is very specific. It's primarily pass-through money from the state or federal government, which has a specified purpose. And so the ability to change it is pretty limited. And so making sure that those expectations are being set. And then secondly, I really appreciate the idea for the 5-year budget or going to 6-year budget, because the only way, at least to increase revenue at the county side, is to have some new initiative. And so whether it is working to increase the Vets and Senior and Human Services levy, but I think it's important for people to recognize just going to the county and asking for additional funding is not likely, because the entire, there's no general fund. That would be the flexible funding. So every line item has a very specified use, whether it's Best Starts for Kids or veterans or whatever it is. And so, one, I'm concerned about raising community expectations, and two, I want to commend you and think that this group should be working on how do we work collaboratively with the county or the city to develop new revenue sources moving forward that will address people who are homeless and unhoused.
Thank you, Adrian. Yes, I would very much appreciate the help, and I'll just say that I think that part of what we hope this exercise provides is, to your point, actually the exact clarity into what is possible and is not inside what we've got, right? And that if we did revenue projections and said, or not revenue projections, sorry, but budget projections and said, so in 23 we need X amount of dollars, and in 24 we need Y amount of dollars, and they're progressively bigger because we need to scale the response, right? Which I think we all know to be true from the data. Then that is a de facto conversation for appropriators and other folks about sort of how we might work together collectively to create the revenue to meet that budget need. My job in that, I think, is, just to be very clear with the board, and you can, as my collective supervisors, offer a correction here. But I think, my job in that is to maximize the revenue that we currently receive, right, from city, county, federal source, state and federal sources, and to make sure that everything is as integrated as it possibly can be, is doing triple work, that we're getting as much as we can from stuff. And then saying, okay, so then here's the gap, and there's nothing smarter we can do with the money that we have.
Yeah,
Nate?
I think I'm next, then Gordon. Yeah, thanks, Simha. And great presentation. Thanks, Mark and the team for that. Obviously, I can't believe we're already in April when in January we met to vote and approve this year's budget, and we committed ourselves when we did so in that action that we would be very thoughtful and coordinate or sooner than later in terms of our own planning throughout the rest of this year for future years. So thank you, Mark, for circling back and what the game plan is moving forward. Certainly to elevate even Adrian's last point and Mark, your welcoming of assistance there on what might be possible and outside of maximizing what we currently project in terms of revenues and funds for the authority's work is, I think, I can't believe it was 4 weeks ago already too, that we uplifted our colleague here, Damien, in terms of being treasurer for our implementation board, and, just hopes in terms of launching our budget committee meeting, as obviously your timeline has a lot happening now within just the next few months or so. And so eager to get started in terms of how implementation board members, including myself as a member of that budget committee, can work alongside with you and your staff, Mark, in terms of supporting that effort. Just one clarification question on mine is, as you're walking through that, the master service agreement with the city of Seattle, is that going to require an amendment at all? Just in terms of, I know the county doesn't have a specific timeline, but since there's the 15th to now pushing them to the same time at the end of the month, is that something that we will need to do?
Yeah, the master service agreement with the city will need to be amended to reflect the new date. A nuance here also that I should point out, and what is driving the selection of that date, is the ILA stipulates that the city and county must receive the budget on the same date. And so we're trying to correct for a number of different things all in one go. We could not move any later than that June 1st date for the purposes of internal city budgeting needs. That is my understanding. So we are in the process now of striking the date that is in the that is a very, it's
Question. One of our audience members asked for closed captioning, so we're going to work on trying to get that done for them, or for all of us. Thank you for lifting that up, Brooke. Gordon, do you have a question?
Actually, I have a comment and then a question, or maybe two comments. Ditto to what Adrian summarized, and I'm really reflecting on the role that we would provide or should provide in support to Mark and the regional authority around having conversations about what revenue is needed, especially once we have the benefit of the 5-year plan and the associated budget implications. So I appreciate that. I just wanted to say to Mark and the team, I really appreciated the logic and the compelling logic of this year, linking the 5-year plan with a 6-year budget plan or approach or macro perspective. And I look forward to helping out with that if I can. The only question, hopefully it's a simple one, assuming we affirm this approach, which you ask us to do, have you already had indication or conversations with the city and the county about this approach that you've identified to us? And are they, I guess, aware and notionally supportive? That's the question.
Yes, we've spoken with the executive's office and Director Floor on the county side, spoken extensively with interim director Kim at HSC and Director Dingley at CBO, as well as the teams at both HSC and CBO working out how to make this happen, so that if affirmed, we can move forward. Not to just to lift the curtain a little bit, there were a number of technical concerns about how to upload the data and who had to write which memos, and so there was actually quite a bit bureaucracy to unwind to make sure that it would be okay. And we believe that we have settled those issues and are good to go, and should be able to proceed if from the technical capacity perspective, and getting the documents to the right people in the right formats, if approved.
All right. Well, if no one else, unless someone objects, I'm going to go ahead and share my questions, concerns. Mark, first, I think certainly trying to transfer the budget to the city in the next month is just untenable to provide any kind of oversight. And I think the plan that you describe of putting together this next year's budget in the next weeks, and then the 5-year budget over the next month, is a good one, but still ambitious. Here's my request to you, which is that whoever is taking the lead on the budget process, if we could have them reach out directly to Damien and help make this, help ensure that someone at the senior level directing the budget process is involved with the treasurer and the budget committee is, I think, very important. Second, I love the idea that you had of having the system redesign committee, which is not taken off yet, being closely involved in the 5-year planning, right? So if we could have somebody who is taking the lead on that, on the 5-year budget process, reach out to our system redesign committee, which we will get running, well, now. We need, or help, actually, frankly, we will need some help making sure these things are up and running and staffed so that we can provide the support that I think you're hoping for and looking for.
And I'm happy to, oh, sorry, did you have another question?
No, that's all.
Okay, I'm happy to provide whatever support would be helpful to stand up the system redesign. I mean, just like tell me what you need, and we'll make the organizational resources, if they exist. They probably exist.
Thank you, Mark.
To do it. And Meg Barclay, who is the Chief Administrative Officer and is on this line, can be in touch with Damien to align on expectations.
Great, thank you so much. Appreciate that. And then I think Harold had a question, and then Mark, you were going to share a little bit more. Harold?
Mark, how do we differentiate this from the past, the 5-year plan, the 10-year plan, and here we go again with a 100-year plan? For me, I would hope we would package it different, more of a budgetary view, and not with deliverables that aren't going to be made, or pie in the sky, or hypotheticals that, oh, if this goes right, that goes right, and we don't have a pandemic again, that's what will happen. So please relieve me and tell me that's not what you're doing or packaging. 5 years, just the LIA says you have to have it done at a certain time, and that's what you're doing. It's not where you're going to have deliverables that might not happen, but these are budgetary needs that you see growing to help make a dent in homelessness with the King County Regional Homeless Authority.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think that's my intention as much as possible, and I'm very would to the extent that we are able to get a system committee set up, I would love to have this conversation with you all and whoever is part of that subcommittee. What I have been thinking about and have talked with the team about is to attempt to structure the 5-year plan as a sort of hybrid of the initial 2018 NIS report and the 2019 Regional Action Framework that built off the NIS report done by CSH, right? And the CSH Regional Action Framework goals were ambitious, but also specifically, I mean, they were calculated to be doable in many cases within the current system architecture of that year, right? And so while things have undoubtedly shifted dramatically and in some cases gotten worse, I think one of the things that, to Chair Reddy's point about the ambitiousness of the timeline, one of the reasons why we feel like the timeline is not overly ambitious is we are not attempting to recreate the wheel or spin up brand new stuff, right? We are very, clearly building off of a depth of planning work that has already been done in the community and need not be recreated. It just needs to be perhaps tuned or affirmed. And in the hybridization, what I'm attempting to hit is this sort of essentially if then, right? Of like, if this resource level of resource is available, then this impact could be implemented, right? Like, so that we're saying very clearly that, to the point that that Adrian raised, that we're not setting up the authority to be on the hook for things we don't have the capacity, either budget-wise or staff-wise or whatever, to do, right? But to say that, so in 2023, with a budget of this, which we expect not to be too far, given that we're doing this now, right? We expect the 2023 budget, I think it frankly would not be responsible to ask for a dramatically different budget in 2023, given, what we understand of, again, the various revenue sources at city and county, city of Seattle and county. But I think that, what we'll say, right? So 2023, we expect a budget of, close to what we are operating now. And these are the results we want to index against. And, here are the strategies we're going to pursue to do that. In 2024, we'd like to be at a different budget level, right? More. and if that is true, then here are the things that we will, anticipate delivering. Inside that sort of if-then structure, that should also allow us the flexibility every spring, right, as part of the update process to say, okay, we're not going to get that money, or again, we're seeing an upsurge, and so we need to, an upsurge of maybe families, and so we really need to again intensify what we're doing in that space. That the work of the spring can be to have a robust, public, transparent conversation that is evaluating the if part of it, and then putting forward the then and getting your approval on it. So that the what I'm attempting to sort of get the design architecture right around is thoughtful, good, measurable strategic planning, but also not something that operates as a fixed, well, you said you would do this, and it doesn't matter, right, whether or not it was funded. Because I think that has been much of the difficulty with a number of things in the community thus far, right? Is like the funding has been inconsistent, or it hasn't been at scale. And so the results have been difficult to generate.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I don't see any other hands raised, so if you would like to finish your report or share anything else.
Sure. Very briefly, because I know I'm slightly over, I believe, but I just want to provide a brief status update on a community conversation and a message that you all received from a provider who was not selected through a competitive application. And I think that there are 3 key points I'd like to make. One, and this goes to the comment that we heard in public comment, I need to be very clear with the public and with this board that the, and I actually spoke with a community group last night and said much the same thing, and I'll try to say it as plainly here as I did there. Neither I nor this agency have an axe to grind with tiny homes as a shelter type, right? And I want to be really clear about this. I said this to the community group, and so I'll say it to you all because I feel like, you all should have trust in me in this, and I should speak to you in that same way. If I really wanted to get rid of them, I would have just defunded them on like day 3. Like we wouldn't be having this conversation, right? What I have said repeatedly and will stress again is radical expansion, which was what was being put forward to me last year, where the question was, should we rapidly open 10 to 15 more tiny home villages I said the data does not support an expansion of that scale, and we would need to vet that very thoroughly before we made that kind of commitment with public funds. That was the position then, it is the position now. We maintain roughly 500 beds of tiny home shelter that we have made no move to pull back from, shut down, defund, like none of that is under discussion. And in the non-congregate shelter RFP that just concluded, 2 of the 3 awards will stand up new tiny home villages. There is, and I cannot stress this enough, 0 credible or factual assertion in any statement made by anyone that this agency or I specifically am trying to unwind all of the tiny homes tomorrow, and that we have not, and frankly, that we have not made new investments into tiny home shelter types. And I think that is very important, given the conversation, that be clear as true. The second thing that I'll say, which again, I just want to be clear with the board and also with the public, is that the agency that has been at the center of much of this conversation, which did not, secure through the competitive process an award, declined to file a formal grievance. And so while there has been much conversation, while you all received a letter, when we reached out and said, is there a grievance here? Is the process being grieved? We received in writing, no, it is not. So at the agency level, there is no longer action for me as the agency head or our staff to take. We're done. The third thing that I will say is in our commitment to competitive award process, as outlined in the interlocal agreement that establishes us, we have identified some one-time funding that we can use to solve the money that has been removed and directly allocated to Lehigh. So the 3 projects that were awarded through the competitive process will move forward. And we have been in communication with those awarded agencies and are now in the process of doing the final checks, the contracts, et cetera, to move forward with getting those things set up. I felt it was very important as part of my update, given the fervor, to not just discuss the budget, but to also make sure that we had the appropriate conversation about that as well as needed. And I'm happy to answer any other questions, but it seemed that there was quite a bit of confusing and perhaps deliberately misleading information that had become very much embedded in the talking points of folks, including a number of media narratives, et cetera, that I just need to take every opportunity to ensure that we're clear on what is happening.
Nate, do you have a question?
Sorry,
Do you
I
have a
got my kid with
question?
me here for a sec. I understand. Thanks, Mark, for that. And I just understand that there's our executive committee met recently on this too. But looking at our co-chairs or any of our exec members, if there's anything else that you'd like to share or add to that.
Unless, Harold, may I? Okay. So I guess I'll jump in, Nate. So there was a letter sent out by community partner Lehigh, and for me that letter had really raised 2 primary questions, I guess. The first was, and these are both technical questions separate from this question of like, does the RHA believe in tiny homes as being helpful in people exit homelessness? And the first question in my mind was, should the KCRHA have like reasonably believed that they were the ones who were going to administer $2 million from the state towards tiny homes in Seattle? And the second question in my mind was, believing that, did they use a competitive bidding process that made sense, right, and was, you know, in line with our policies? So last week, Harold, Paula, and I, 3 of the 4 members of the executive committee, had a chance to meet with Mark. We reviewed, you know, the initial letter from Lehigh, draft letter from Mark. We'd had a chance to sort of look at the reporting in the media. And then we went through kind of like a timeline of events over this last year, like trying to get into the weeds as much as we thought was appropriate for us to provide oversight. And, you know, having done all that, I think Paula and Harold and I all came to the agreement that, yeah, the answer to both questions was yes. I think the RHA acted appropriately here in terms of believing that they were going to be administering that $2 million. And that once they believed that, they had a competitive bidding process that was in line with like the policies that we had passed just last November, our procurement policies. So overall, like, I think we had a chance to review things in further detail and kind of felt confident in the letter that Mark had sent out to the implementation board and governing committee to provide clarification. You know, that being said, I'll just speaking for myself, I think I've been sort of slowly reflecting on this because it's been something that's been bothering me for a little bit, which is that there's been a lot of heat, right, in the media elsewhere, even in, you know, a comment from Bill earlier today, right? Not that he was angry, but that there's this feeling of tension, right? And fundamentally, an error happened. Not necessarily from the RHA's end, not like, I don't think there is a particular villain here. I think people were trying to do their best. And stepping back, looking at this, it really does look like this is a situation in which good people trying their hardest could have come to different conclusions, especially with a real lack of like closed loop communication, really clear communication, especially as money moves from the state to the city, Department of Transportation of the state, like HSD at the city, and then the RHA. There were a lot of cooks in the kitchen around this particular fund. But fundamentally, I think the RHA did their due diligence and did their best here. So that was my impression. Harold, Paula, anything to add to that? And
Oh,
for the
well,
rest of the implementation board, I just wanted to, sorry. I just wanted to share, I
Oh,
hope you feel
you
this
have
was
something to
within
say?
our purview as the executive committee to jump into this pre-meeting so that we could share that with you.
Well, Paula doesn't have anything right now to say. From my time at the city, and I can't go into things, but I could, but I won't. My observation is that if we continue to, and we shouldn't be doing that in this body of work with the King County Regional Homeless Authority, allowing agencies to dictate how we operate. I didn't think the implementation board could have a role in this because it's operation and that's all Mark. We will lose perspective on those agencies who don't want to do things right. I'll lift up Catholic Community Services only for they do wraparound services in most of their buildings, and they adhere to the housing first model. And they try. They're not perfect. No one's perfect, but they try harder than I worked in that for maybe a few weeks. I was able to see that it's a vast different, and I don't hear them complaining. And they're a big agency. But I think when there's a set aside money that goes to you, and then you're complaining about not getting more money. Remember, we're making this money off the backs, and I'll just go through this room, people who work in homeless social service, including myself. This is money given to us, and we're making salaries off the backs of those people who are dying and crying in the street. Not the people who run agencies have $1 million homes. I'll go to my colleague Karen Taylor, and she says it so firmly and so trustworthy. This has been going on for longer than 10, 15 years. Someone should have been fired in agencies and in government because people are still dying, crying, and exhibiting mental health issues, substance abuse issues, and they're being blamed for being the scourge of this country. Agencies should do what they say they're going to do on paper and let us do what we say we're going to do on paper, try to make a significant dent in a whole different way of running a homeless entity that's going to be striking different chords. Because for someone who's homeless, and I reached out to the places and I couldn't get housed, still can't until we had HUD reissue those vouchers. Couldn't get it because we didn't have the capacity or the staff here on a consistent basis. Before we ask people more money, make sure they can do what they say they're going to do on paper first. And that's personal because I see it from both ends. So just a little perspective on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Harold. Nate, hopefully that provided some clarity to what we reviewed. Any final comments before we move on? I know we've gone way over time, and Mark, appreciate you taking that extra time with us. All right. Thanks. We've got a plan for a budget coming up here quick, a 5-year plan budget, just a few months down the road, and then hopefully this other issue will be put to bed or is put to bed.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
All right.
Thank you, Mark.
Well, we will do our best to try to catch up as we go, but we are likely going to have to either cut short a presentation or extend our time, just as a heads up. Next on our agenda is to discuss policy revisions for Peter Lynn and Tiffany Brooks. We are here and want to take it away, Peter.
Good afternoon. Thanks so much. Peter Lynn, Chief Program Officer. I use he, him pronouns. I wanted to introduce two modest revisions to policies that have been presented and approved by the implementation board before. One of them is our conflict of interest policy. As we worked through it and working to align it with other rules and regulations we have, we added some features to it. There were some modest additions. We added agents as one of the covered members, family members, those kinds of details. So pretty modest changes to the way that worked. And we also incorporated the language from the ILA, which had been included by reference, but was not presented in the policy. That is the first one that's in front of you. It's our code of ethics, conflict of interest policy. The second one is our signature policy. And that, when we presented that early on, we were making some estimates about the way that the portfolio would look and what the appropriate levels were. And as we got a hold of, what contract levels we were, we realized that the average, value of contracts actually exceeds the signing authority for the chief program officer. So, part of what we're trying to do is keep things within the appropriate range of oversight. And when, everything has to go to the chief executive, it's that wasn't the intention of the policy. The intention of the policy was to set approval levels that mirrored the way that the portfolio exists. So we've readjusted those, and that's what you see in front of you.
Thank you, Peter. Hopefully folks have had a chance to review the policies, code of ethics, conflict of interest policy, the contract signature policy, and policy around being able to provide some relocation funds for people coming to work at the REJ. Do we have questions from the board regarding these policies? One question I had, Peter, was do we need to send out an updated disclosure form for all the members of the Implementation Board and Governing Council?
Once approved, we would send this back out to everybody who is covered by the policy, which would include our contract providers as well.
Okay, wonderful, thanks. All right. Michael?
Yeah, I just doing the code of ethics policy, and as it applies to us, I do want to flag for discussion at some point, not necessarily with regard to the policy, what constitutes confidentiality. And I'll use an example just for the sake of discussion. The executive committee functioning as executive committee, are you under confidentiality related to sharing, for example, the matter we just discussed, or is it matters, or are the boundaries of confidentiality the same as the boundaries of public disclosure? So for example, the discussions then could be publicly shared, and therefore we have on as board members an enhanced responsibility, or at least a clarified responsibility of what we're allowed to share or not share, if the boundary is what it can be publicly disclosed by the law of the state of Washington. The reason I get, because many of us on this board, we either work for agencies or we're affiliated. We're involved in public discussion and advocacy. So what constitutes confidentiality is one that we should more narrowly define at some point, because I have bifocal lenses. In other words, I'm a member of this committee, and if I'm disclosed something about the regional authority, there's X, but I'm also an advocate with my organization that has an interest also in ending homelessness. And so there's a line there. So it may be that at some point clarification about the terms of confidentiality as per the implementation board might be warranted. And seeing the recent discussion in the city of Seattle about public disclosure, some further thought or clarification that could be discussed at a subsequent meeting might be warranted. So just to flag it without necessarily changing the terms of what we have here.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Pastor Kerry Anderson?
Yes, let me just echo what Michael has said. Our church and me personally, we're involved in a lot of advocacy work that really parallels with the work of the King County Regional Homelessness group that I'm a part of. So I would like to know too, so I'm not blurring the lines as we move forward in this great work. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Kerry. Michael, it sounds like we should try to make some time for this conversation specifically. I will just share briefly that regarding this, like how much between the executive committee and the rest of the implementation board, it's a question I am really unsure of, and would, we'll try to seek some guidance on. One of my worries during this last week was if I call each member of the board and sort of discuss it, are we accidentally, creating a quorum and, alighting public records issues? And to be frank, this is new to me, so I'll try to seek more guidance on how an executive committee should be working with regards to confidentiality and the rest of the board and the public. So thank you for flagging that, Michael. So we had the, oh, I'm sorry, Harold.
I would just like to, when I started talking earlier, confidentiality statements, I believe, are just a piece of paper unless we as a board understand how they are part of a system and not a bad part of the system, but a good part of the system. There are things that I learned in meetings at City of Seattle that could benefit my advocacy, but I have to ask myself, is it right? So it comes down to my personal ethics and what am I going to do? And I think it's that piece of paper needs to reflect that we do have a board that has integrity, and our integrity is more important than the individual sitting on this board. And I have to take that into account every time I'm thinking about something, especially when it comes to certain providers, because what I know is what I know, and that's all. It's not for anybody else's benefit. It is discussion. Everybody needs a place to have an open discussion, speak frankly, speak maybe some wrong thoughts, but still have that discussion outwards. It comes out of your mouth, out of your soul, out of your head. But yeah, to have a safe spot for that. So a confidentiality in the executive community has to be that as well, because we do work for different agencies, and what we say and what we know, we should honor those confidentialities elsewhere before we come to this meeting as well.
Thank you, Harold. And John?
There we go. I still say there should be federal law that says the mute button and the video button has to be in the exact same place on all of these platforms. Sorry about the delay. Just from the standpoint of being a public agency, I will tell you that nothing is confidential, almost nothing, unless there's an attorney-client privilege that attaches to it. And there are maybe some areas where there are numbers that could be kept confidential. There may be an issue that comes up where there is an exception in the open public meetings and the Open Public Records Act. But for the most part, as an agency, there's very little confidentiality. And I think what Harold's talking to there is also very important, that there is a personal integrity that we all need to bring to this so that no one is seen, especially if they represent an agency, that no one is seen as trying to get a leg up, if you will, on others who are competing for contracts. So that's just my thoughts on the whole confidentiality. And if our legal counsel is on here, they can weigh in as well. I always say expect to see it on the front page of the Seattle Times if it's juicy enough.
Thanks, John. Erring on the side of transparency, always. Well, Peter, and by the way, I just want to inform folks that Meg Barclay here is actually standing in for Tiffany if there are any questions about the relocation policy. But we have a few policies to take action on today. Do we have a motion to approve the new QCRHA Code of Ethics, Conflict of Interest, its contract signature policy, and its relocation policy as provided in our briefing?
So moved.
Adrian. And do we have a second?
Second.
Paula? Can we get a roll call, please? Actually, Meg, did you have a brief comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to specify that the approval of the relocation policy would also approve the use of up to $72,000 for those relocation costs as consistent with the approval of initial relocation funding.
But
Just
no more than
say
1
that
month.
for the record. Yeah.
But no more than 1 month salary per employee.
Exactly. Exactly. Thank you.
Thanks. All right. Actually, why don't we do a voice vote unless anyone objects?
Do we need to do a roll call for items like these? I'm looking at staff.
Yeah.
No, is what I'm getting.
No need, okay. All right, all those in favor, say aye, please.
Aye.
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 All those, thank you. All those opposed?
All right,
Harold, are you opposed?
no, I said aye.
Apologies. An aye for me as well. All those opposed, please say nay. Is anyone abstaining from this vote? The motion passes. These policies are approved as written. Thank you. And thank you, Nate, for checking on that. Next, we have Alexis Mercedes Rink here with us from KCRJ. She very kindly moved to her presentation from last month now, and so we're excited to hear what you have to offer. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you so much, Chair. And just as a time check, I know there's a lot on the agenda today. About how much time do I have? I'm happy to keep things brief in the interest of keeping us on schedule.
If you can try to, our Katara Jordan of the Office of the Ombuds asked for a little bit more dedicated time, so she's asked to move to the May meeting, and I think that's appropriate. So we have a little bit more time. If you can try to keep to about 10 minutes, though, that would be fantastic.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I'm going to share my screen and thank you all. Hi, great to be in community with you. For the record, my name is Alexis Mercedes Rink. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm coming to you all today to talk through how we're looking to really strengthen and formalize partnership all around the region. And so just jumping right into it, I'm going to be talking about two strategies specifically today, one related to pooling funding subregionally and another related to how we are looking to affirm and include some of these existing subregional tables into how we're approaching work in subregional planning. And so in some initial funding analyses done around the region, many jurisdictions are putting forward dollars in addressing homelessness. In our initial analysis, we found thus far about $14 million being provided to local service providers by about 14 different cities. And this funding is going to 50 different agencies, many of which are we are contracting with as the KCRHA. And so in that analysis, we are looking for actually really applying a subregional approach to how we can pool funding particularly. I want to note that in the early days, back at the beginning of the authority, and I think I can say that as employee number 4, we talked about jurisdictions signing into like the KCRHA ILA. As we're moving forward, we're kind of shifting that approach and looking at what it would look like to instead have subregional ILAs where a coalition of cities in a regional basis would sign into an interlocal agreement with us, and we would pool dollars subregionally. And so some of the immediate kind of benefits that we could see towards doing this type of pooling, we could see eased administrative burden, since the vast majority of organizations that are receiving funding from jurisdictions around the region to address homelessness are actually already contracted with the KCRHA and will be using the Flex system. Many jurisdictions use a different platform called Tier 1, and pooling with us could mean that providers have one less system to navigate, learn, manage, monitor. We're also committed to maintaining that dollars pooled in a subregion would stay allocated within that subregion. And lastly, we could have improved alignment on really how we measure progress, since there would be more consistency in just metrics and evaluation. And so paired with this, we're also looking at how we can look to formalize and strengthen our partnership with some of these existing subregional tables. And to do this, we're looking at what it will mean to designate some of these regional bodies as like advisory to subregional planning. In some cases, signing into an existing MOA, and I'll get specific with what we're talking about with that, or how we can just really perhaps really look at how we could more formally include them in the process. We're already really present at a number of these subregional tables. There are 4 that I've listed here, particularly that are regional settings where conversations around homelessness are at the forefront. These settings include the North King County Coalition on Homelessness, the South King County Homelessness and Housing Partnership Executive Committee, as well as the South King County Homelessness Action Committee, and then the Eastside Homelessness Advisory Committee. And so we're still in the exploratory phase about what this would look like. But to be really concrete and specific, the North King County Coalition on Homelessness has invited KCRHA to sign into their memorandum of agreement, which is a document in which really the membership for that coalition expresses kind of, this is where the table in North King County where conversations are had about how North King County can move forward in addressing homelessness. And so as we're looking at sub-regional tables roles in planning, we as KCRHA stepping into, strengthening our partnership in these tables would love to work with them about making sure that lived experience is also present in these settings, and BIPOC and organizations supporting folks with marginalized identities or historically oppressed identities are also present and able to inform, and then exploring what it would mean to use equitable decision-making frameworks with some of those bodies. And a little bit more rationale as to why we're looking at this type of approach is we'd really like to just formalizing the involvement of a sub-regional body just mutually benefits these subregions in KCRHA. Having some clarity about where these conversations are had as they're related to a particular geographic subregion is really just helpful as we move forward. Additionally, we want to really preserve some localized decision making. A lot of the folks who have been a part of these tables have been doing this for a while and are really intimately familiar with the needs of their communities and what historically has worked or not worked and what the issues and challenges have been. This would also help in promoting some place-based strategy development. We think this could also just encourage regional engagement and just really working towards how do we co-develop strategy. And the sub-regional planning team in moving forward with this could also support some of these sub-regional bodies, whether it be helping working with co-chairs to put together agendas and just helping set some strategic direction. And so in summation, we're looking at a kind of two-pronged approach, really looking at acknowledging that there's existing regional bodies that could be core to informing some of these sub-regional planning activities while supporting lived experience representation. And then looking at what it would mean to pool funding in a sub-regional way and explore an ILA between KCRHA and North King County, and then East King County and South King County. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen here and happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much for that, Alexis. I'll open up to the board. What questions do you have for Alexis? Adrian, and then Gordon, and then John.
Thanks. Great, very succinct presentation, Alexis. I'm curious about what Sound Cities thinks of that proposal.
Sound Cities as a whole has not weighed in particularly. Just to be clear, usually Sound Cities, when they come forward on a particular policy position, will bring it before the PIC, Public Issues Committee. But we've been in deep conversation with various jurisdictions about this. There's definite interest in moving forward, and we've been having bi-weekly meeting conversations on just like a logistics level to really explore what would it mean to make that happen across all of the councils in given subregions.
Great, thank you.
Adrian. Gordon?
Alexis, thank you very much. Inspiring and succinct presentation. I had a similar question, I had the same question as Adrian, so thanks for answering that. And then I thought I heard you say you were working with 4 tables, entities for a sub-regional ILA, but then you showed 3, and it might have been my hearing, so just wanted to get a clarification on that. Was it 4 or 3?
There's 4 tables that have been identified, but there were 3 bullet points because the second bullet point points to that there's 2 South King County tables that talk about homelessness. I want to note it's a group called SKIP, the South King County Homelessness and Housing Partners. They right now have leaned more into affordable housing work, but homelessness is within their purview. And so we're in conversation to kind of scope out how do we work collaboratively but not step on their toes. But then there's also the South King County Homelessness Action Committee, which is a table of a lot more service providers, advocates, city partners. And so we're trying to just start conversations about what would this look like.
Great, thanks for that clarification.
Thank you, Gordon and Alexis. John, you have a question?
Yeah, I sure do. I am wondering, and you started to answer it, I'm wondering who makes up and how they get appointed to those four bodies, the four tables, as you called them. I'm not 100% familiar with that, although you did start to answer at least who's at the table in South County.
Absolutely. Each of those tables is really different. The North King County, I know, makes it for a really interesting process to try and move forward and like, how do we have an aligned strategy? The North King County Coalition on Homelessness has a particular appointment process for each of the entities, and they're perhaps in some ways one of the more formalized bodies because they have that memorandum of agreement already between the cities. And happy to provide more detail again on that, but that has a more formal appointment process. The body I just mentioned, the South King County Homelessness and Housing Partners Table, also has a similar appointment process, a little bit more formal. The South King County Homelessness Action Committee is a bit more informal. The co-chair of that table is voted on, but it's an open setting where folks come into that space. And so there's not a formal appointment process for that space. And I think similarly, the Eastside Homelessness Advisory Committee is an open forum for folks who are service providers, folks with lived experience, other partners, and city partners as well.
So, and North King County has asked KCHRA to become, did I get that right? To become a signer to their interlocal?
It's a memorandum of agreement, and they have invited us to become a signee on it. There are other countywide entities that are part of it. The Healthcare for the Homeless Network through Public Health has also been invited to be a signee of that as well and be a partner at that table.
Okay, I'm going to say that my guess is you will find that if you're asking the cities to pool money, the cities most likely are going to want to have some role in the appointment of who sits on a board like that. And I think, and I know more about the East Side than other places, although it sounds like North County is a bit ahead of us. Most of the cities have a human services board that weighs in specifically on funding. In Bellevue, we worked very hard to never change a funding decision made by the Human Services Commission, so that we tried to depoliticize the end runs that occur. So those are just some thoughts on that. And I would say that I would guess that that's what SCA is going to be perhaps more interested in. I'm really happy that we are moving ahead with this sub-regional approach to it. We do have to protect that theory of change, and we're going to need to have the voices of people who are or have been homeless involved in that in some way. So that's pretty much ingrained in the way we're going to do business in this new agency. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Lamont?
No, thank you. I just wanted to thank John for really affirming the importance of searching the theory of change and people with lived experience. So thank you, John, for that. And I've been able to witness some of Alexis's work and really seeing her lean into that, partnering with people living homeless in that sub-regional work. And so before I get to my question, just a little bit of setup. Like, we know that with a lot of the encampment clearings and sweeps, like, people are being pushed out of Seattle, and along the Pack Highway corridor, there's quite a pipeline now of folks kind of moving out of Seattle into SeaTac, Des Moines, further into Federal Way, and even into Fife, and they're seeing increases in Tacoma, Pierce County, where they've had in a 30-day period, 500 new episodes of homelessness. And so it's like literally this kind of Pack Highway corridor pipeline that's happening. And we have all those different jurisdictions, and they all have different approaches. Some are taking more of a humanizing approach and a health and human services approach, and some are leaning into, criminal legal interventions and that aren't very trauma informed, or housing first and all those things that we really support. And so my question is there a possibility with this ILA to not only pool funding, but the work around having a humanizing approach to homelessness that those regions can agree upon as well?
That's a fantastic question that I would need to talk to our legal counsel about what can be included in this type of agreement and how, like, what the broader scope is. Something else related to this. So I'm saying we would need to explore what that would mean particularly. And I know a number of those jurisdictions are contracted partners with King County Sheriff's Office, and some have their own specific police departments. So would want to explore that not only with legal counsel, but then also just what it would mean to incorporate that in.
Yeah, I just wanted to say really quickly as a follow-up too, and this is so important because like we're getting stories live, you know, people with lived experience out there, the Lived Experience Coalition, and there's a lot of really sad things, dehumanizing things that are happening that are just really unfathomable for this region. And so what if there's a municipality in a jurisdiction that is having a very aggressive law enforcement stance to homelessness that doesn't go with the values of King County Regional Homeless Authority? Will we want to pool funds and resources with a jurisdiction that may have a very harmful and dehumanizing approach?
Agreed.
Lamont, thank you for raising those concerns. Michael, question or comment from you?
Thank you, Alexis. A sub-regional approach is very important, and I applaud your leadership in shaping the work and being present in these various communities, which is a very big county, very broad and diverse. So I appreciate your leadership there. I do raise some questions, maybe for longer discussion about what authority these regional groups would have with an MOA. Specifically, what accountability do they have to represent among themselves lived experience, leadership of BIPOC communities, and an equitable decision-making framework? I don't know that there's guarantees that those entities operate with those functions in mind. Unwittingly, over-reliance on the local regional, sub-regional groups could impede the regional homelessness authority for making changes of the nature of humanizing situations that are inhumane. So I would add a precaution as you consider this going forward. The second thing is, so related to that is that there's enormous economic and resource disparities within the county. And so it's the three different regions of the county are like apples, oranges, and berries. There's great differences there. And so the approach is going to require that. And the levels of transparency and accountability may be different too in practice. And so as you consider MOAs, as you consider how we're relying on local groups to consider their level of engagements with the authority, with the values that we hold forward as a county. The final thing is to consider, I immediately thought of the Sound Cities Association. I'm on the Affordable Housing Committee, and they're always speaking up and are taken into account whenever decisions are made about housing in the county. So if sub-regional groups are making some determinations that have some impact on the cities, I don't want to set up a system that another entity can come in with some kind of veto authority that then the cities follow because they're, feel accountable to them rather than the Regional Homelessness Authority and the authority that we have to end homelessness. So just some thoughts to consider as you continue to discern this process. Thank you.
I appreciate that. If I may respond, Board Chair, quickly.
Sorry, I was muted. Yes, Mercedes, of course.
Thank you for that. And thank you for those thoughtful questions, particularly to clarify, SCA staff have been briefed on this, but what I'm taking out of this is really directive as to exploring what are kind of the mechanisms and just kind of the interplay between SCA and moving forward with this type of strategy. So having more of a operational standpoint conversation, I can take that as very directive. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alexis. Implementation board and public, I see we've just got 19 minutes left for 2 more presentations. I think some of our board members will certainly need to leave at exactly 4 o'clock, but I want to open up the possibility of us staying on for an extra 10 minutes for those who are, or extra 15 minutes for those who are able to stay. Would I have a motion to stay on for up to 15 minutes, hopefully not needing it?
So move.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Great. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Sorry, any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. We will have to, we won't be making any decisions past 4 o'clock, but we will do our best to wrap up by then. But I want to ensure we have just a bit of extra lead time in case we need it. Thank you, implementation board, and thank you, Alexis, for that presentation and discussion. I believe we have Danielle Bessemer here to speak with us as well about understanding unsheltered homelessness.
Thank you. And I believe there will be, Naomi is pulling up some slides sent out. And as those are being pulled up, just to introduce myself, I'm Danielle Bessemer, she, her pronouns. I'm the Chief Community Impact Officer here at the RHA. And I'm here to share with you about our project to understand unsheltered homelessness as part of the revised PIG count this year. Naomi, are you able to pull up the slides?
Yep, just getting to them now.
Okay, thanks. And chairs, just as a time check, even though I know that we are extending a little bit, I'm assuming I should still aim for around 10 minutes or so.
That'd be wonderful if you can. Thank you.
Okay, great. I'll do my best. All right. So just as a reminder, I know it's been a while since we talked about this. Instead of a single point in time count in January, like prior years, this year we are focusing through the month of March on doing interviews with our unsheltered neighbors across King County. We developed those interview questions through 12 design workshops with nearly 200 participants, including our LEC folks, some providers, as well as some of our other governing bodies. That happened in January and February. And coming out of those workshops, we had also heard loud and clear from those groups that we should be partnering with folks like the LEC to be our main interviewers. We worked with over 25 LEC members who served as interviewers, and our RHA staff partnered with those folks across the region to be in different communities to do interviews through the month of March. Our unsheltered count that we'll submit to HUD is still built into this interview process of how we were doing interviews. There's some fancy statistical things that we'll be doing on the back end to get to an estimated count to send to HUD, but really our focus this year again was on leaning into the experience of our unsheltered neighbors and hearing what they wanted us to know. We also did the sheltered PIC count on March 1st as well through surveys that were similar to prior years. Through the month of March, we were able to touch base and connect with roughly 660 of our unsheltered neighbors who are living in King County. Naomi, can you move to the next slide? Thank you. And before we dive into the kind of what kind of questions we asked during that interview process, I did want to just say a big thank you to our LEC leadership and members, some of whom are on the call today. A particular shout out to Lamont and Marvin, who really leaned in and partnered with us to help us to connect with those 25 LEC members. It was a big lift and just so appreciative of their partnership and leadership in this space. So the design workshops that I had mentioned that happened in January and February shaped our interview questions on what we had our LEC folks asking our unsheltered neighbors. So those really fell into 3 buckets. The first was around self-identification and determination. So what is it that folks are identifying as their needs right now? What do their desired solutions or what does success look like for them? The second bucket was around barriers, whether that's in accessing the systems like shelter or other housing resources that we have, other roadblocks that they're experiencing, whether it's because there aren't services for folks who have pets or partners. Those were the type of questions that we're asking in that section. And then the last bucket that we heard from those design workshops was talking about folks' current experiences with the service system. So what has it been like to engage in shelters or other housing services that we've had? How have they been navigating the system? What are some suggestions they have about improvements that we could make here? Maybe if you could move to the next slide, thank you. This is just a high-level timeline of where we're at. So again, a reminder, we started out with a customer, provider, and partner engagement in January and February to develop those questions. Use that to map out and plan what the interviews would look like in the month of March. March was our data collection month where we were interviewing those 660 folks. And then now we're here in the data analysis portion and getting prepared for our first milestone, which is to submit our report, our PIT report and count to HUD at the end of this month. We will, after that, we will also be working on synthesizing the themes, especially from the interviews, on what we were hearing from our unsheltered neighbors with the intent of being able to share out a broader community report back sometime in the summer. Just so you know, we have in the check-ins with our interviewers, we have been asking folks just anecdotally, right? What are some of the things that they're hearing? By and large, we're hearing that our unsheltered neighbors, one, appreciated that we were out in community and asking them what their experience was and that they'd like to see more of that. So being heard, being listened to, being in relationship, being connected, specifically from the RHA and other partners, and wanting to see more of that. We also heard, similar to what we know and have been talking about with our LEC partners and others, that systems are difficult to navigate. There was a lot of talk about long waits, circular service loops. So one of the themes that we also heard was, for instance, needing to get identification or documentation, but also requiring levels of identification and documentation that folks don't have. And so feeling stalled out in accessing particular services and not hearing back from folks. We also heard from folks the different ways that racism shows up in our systems and that they aren't necessarily set up for everyone, for different communities, whether that's our Black and Indigenous communities or others like couples were also mentioned on when you have a partner and not being able to access services together. We also heard some themes around our criminal justice system as well throughout communities. It showed up in different ways. Also heard folks mention health and how that impacts their housing or inability to access healthcare. And we also heard some concerns around safety as well within community. So those were a few of the themes that our interviewers were flagging. Again, we'll be spending the coming weeks and months on really digging into more nuanced themes and things that we will be hopefully working in partnership with our LAC interviewers as well as our broader LAC group to vet and make sure that we're capturing what we heard from our unsheltered neighbors to be able to share out with the community. One other thing that I did want to flag before I open up to questions is that in addition to capturing people's experiences and stories and what they wanted to share with us, it was also a really good chance for instance, for our LAC members to be connecting with folks who aren't already connected with the LAC. We had a lot of LAC interviewers flagging that they had met folks that were not engaged with that within that space and were able to share contact information and hoping to see them show up in those different spaces and community. We also had some stories too around folks who were actually hesitant to engage with services, but after being able to be in conversation and in those kind of trusted spaces with our interviewers, we did have some instances where folks asked for contact information for outreach workers or services, and had a couple stories where folks were then able to access, for instance, emergency housing vouchers coming out of those spaces. So really good opportunities and ways that we were able to build relationship and trust, I think, in community. And again, that theme we were hearing loud and clear from day one is how can we do more of this and continue to be engaged in those spaces. So I'm going to pause there, and Naomi, I think you can take the slides down, and if folks had any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
No, thank you so much. And I'm just going to share briefly that last month I happened to be at the RHA headquarters to talk, discuss a health related issue, and accidentally crashed your meeting, your meeting you had with Mark. And I just wanted to share with the board how impressed I was, like, by Mark, by you, the rest of your team. Like, there was a sense of like a real depth of knowledge, confidence, and just in the way you spoke about these issues, like a real sense of mission. And so it made me glad to be a part of the RHA. And anyway, I'll stop trying to embarrass you there and open it up to others. Lamont, do you have your hand raised, or is that from before?
No, I do. Thank you, Sima. And, thank you, Danielle. Your team has been wonderful. It's been just an awesome partnership with the Lived Experience Coalition and others of our unhoused neighbors and partners, mutual aid groups doing wonderful work. But I'm quite surprised that the data doesn't mention anything about the harm being done by the suites. And I would be remiss in this role to sit here and to not express the pain, the suffering, the dehumanization that's occurring with the current sweeps. And I believe that it takes all of us together, government, business, faith communities, all of us. I don't believe in having this us versus them, right? I think we all share this goal of ending homelessness, but this really has to stop. And I believe as a community, we can do better. And what we've been hearing by our unhoused neighbors, the impact of the sweeps, people being pushed into further areas that are not accessible and not safe, the level of older adults with vulnerable health conditions, people living in their vehicles. And so can we as a community, and can this implementation board, we have some type of anti-racist strategy chart process to examine how we are currently conducting these sweeps and find a better, more humanizing way. We can't sleep on this. And so I just want to put that plea out there. And Danielle, if there's anything that you've heard from folks about this impact.
Thank you, Lamont. I appreciate you bringing that up and flagging it. And we did, I know I talked about really, really broad, big buckets of what we had heard initially in those debriefs with our interviewers, particularly around the criminal justice system. Folks did mention sweeps and interactions with the police, whether they were informal or informal. And we did have quite a few folks, I think, and I did interviews as well, right? And it came up in some of mine as well on how people felt like they were being forced to move, whether it was in formal or informal ways.
And the notices are decreasing. They're often not done in multiple languages. And there is a better way. And I just hope the implementation board, King County Regional Homeless Authority, that maybe we can convene a community process with our mutual aid groups and people like Bill and our coalitions and our providers, governments, everyone. Let's come up with a better way and approach, a unified approach where we are not sweeping people in the current manner that's happening when we know there's not enough housing resources.
I'm just Harold. I'm just going to add on just a little bit. We also don't know those unintentional consequences. I hate that. When we speak of the homeless as mental health issues, substance abuse, and now the narrative is criminal. We have to do safety because there's just too much violence out there. I like just this group and the public to understand that the majority of crime and unsafe behavior comes from people who have homes. Small percentage of people who are living on the street on survival, they steal food, and if they have drug problem, yeah, but that is not the majority. But we still put those labels on the homeless. So now we have people who are feeling it's okay to victimize them, hurt them in the street because they don't care. We have to change the narrative, as Omar was saying, so we can do better. Because as we put these labels on people, we make them a target as well. And that's unfortunate and shameful.
And furthermore, we have to remember that this is a disability justice and a racial justice issue. That many of our folks living homeless, not all, but many, are living with disabilities and physical health issues and other issues. And so I just want to really, reinforce that this is a major disability justice and racial justice issue, and we can do better. We can do better than this as a community.
I like to just add to that, being Indigenous and being in Coast Salish territory, and remember how people were treated on this land, and their land was taken from them, and they were the ones that were moved out. And let's not forget that. And we don't want to repeat those mistakes from the past. And Lamont's right, and Harold, and we're here to advocate and use our voices for them. And there should be a more humane way, and also provide when you do them in the process of change and transforming our systems, so we can all be better people on the inside and help the people on the outside. And it's that chronic homelessness. And that's why we're in a crisis now. We're in a racial crisis, and all because of those disparities. And to tell the truth and to know that we really need to save lives and protect people and be better advocates and provide for them, not just push them out, and that's really an ugly word, a sweep. And you really think about it, it's dehumanizing. And what are you sweeping out? And, you think about the Indigenous people, were we trash? Nobody didn't think about us as valuable. And that's why they did it in the first place, because it's oppressive, it's hurtful, and we can't forget that. And we have to always remember these things, these principles. And there is a better way. I don't think we have a lack of resources or a lack of housing. You think about all the buildings that they're building right now. There should be, even the apartment building I live in, they could turn this place into a shelter if they wanted to. I mean, really. And let's not forget, we're still in this pandemic, and think about those that are outside suffering. And that illness, I see it every day, and it hurts me. I can't just walk by it with a closed heart and not feel nothing. And it's painful, and it needs to stop.
Leah, Lamont, and Harold for raising that up, and for your work in helping share the voices of the people you're interviewing. And as Pastor Carey says, yeah, your passion matters. We've reached the 4 o'clock hour. I do want to just take a moment if our advocate co-directors are here with us.
Hi, I think you're calling on us, right?
Elijah?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, you're breaking
Yeah,
up a little
sorry,
bit.
I'm my internet's going bad.
Okay, yeah. Hi, hello everyone. My name is Elijah Wood, and I am one of the co-directors for the Systems Advocate Workforce. And my pronouns are he, him, and his. I'll let Dawn, Zanita, and Joe introduce themselves really quickly first. And then I'll launch into our presentation and ask Naomi to go ahead and put up the slides as well.
Well, hi, my name is Dawn Shepard, and I use she, her pronouns, and I am also one of the new co-directors for the System Advocate Workforce. And I met most of you last month when we did the vehicle residency presentation. So good to see all of you again.
I'm Zanita Reed, co-director, she, her pronouns, co-director for the new Systems Advocates Workforce. And I know many of you.
And good afternoon. I'm Joe Conniff. I use he, him pronouns, also one of the co-directors of the System Advocate Workforce. Great to be here with you all this afternoon.
Amazing, thank y'all. So I'm gonna launch into this presentation. Naomi, when you can, could you throw our slides up for us, please?
Will do, one moment.
Okay, cool. Probably lots of presentations to navigate today.
Truth. Okay.
Okay. So I'll go ahead and launch in while that's loading up. Okay, so we're going to talk today a little bit about our workforce that we're creating within the RHA and starting to hire for, and a little bit around the timelines for it, and a little bit of the reasoning for the Systems Advocate Workforce being in place at the RHA as well. And the first line of duty or line of business is to talk about, y'all probably know it as the peer navigation workforce. And we've decided to change that nomenclature because peer navigation has kind of a little bit of it's a heavy weight on the word. And we wanted to kind of come into this with a fresh leaf, a fresh page as we're starting out our work. I'll let Joe build on that a little bit before we jump in a little bit more.
Thanks, Elijah. As some folks in attendance here today might be familiar with the terms peer and navigation, though maybe not seen explicitly together throughout our community over the years, as both of those terms have been associated with other efforts to engage some of our unhoused neighbors and other folks in the community in recent years. And so again, as Elijah mentioned, an effort to come with a different approach, with maybe something that's not exhaustive to the folks that we intend to serve. This is the reason for the System Advocate name change. And also in that is encompassing still some of the aspects of peer work and peer efforts, peer navigation, looking at systems advocates as a peer agent and resource broker who also can identify necessary changes to practices or policies that are impacting the lives of our community members with an increased awareness to institutional racism, class disparities, but also with a lens of empathy, dignity, shared decision-making, with an effort to improve health and well-being of all of these individuals we serve, but advocacy being a huge part of systems change, which aligns with our effort collectively here within the RHA.
Cool, thank you so much, Joe. And Naomi, if you could move to the next slide. And the next one, y'all have already seen us and we've gotten our intros past this. Yeah, so I'll start in with kind of like the landscape right now, navigating the current system for folks experiencing homelessness y'all all probably know, like intake protocols are repetitive, invasive. The system, it doesn't provide people with the opportunity to form lasting relationships. So they're bouncing from like outreach staff to peer navigator to case manager to other folks around in the system. And there's no kind of like lasting long-term person there. Sweeps, we all know they're demoralizing, they're dehumanizing, and it's a not great approach to people forced to live outside. And the fragmentation of the system makes it difficult to kind of go towards like unified outcomes at all. So what we're kind of seeing here is like there's a lot of fragmentation, and there's a lot of difficulty of kind of getting in contact with the same people and staying with the same goals with all of these kind of disparate kind of forces going around in the landscape right now. So Naomi, can you move to the next one? Yeah, so that's where the idea of systems advocates come in. We are kind of coming to this landscape and saying, hey, these are maybe some of the solutions. Like Danielle said, like systems are difficult to navigate. We've heard that from folks experiencing homelessness time and time again. And this is kind of one of the solves for that. What we're saying is that system advocates are there to have kind of continuity of services and coordination amidst fragmentation. So it's this unified force that's kind of building up the community and taking on those roles that a lot of folks in outreach jobs and case management jobs and peer navigation jobs are doing, that are kind of taking them away from their actual jobs in the first place. And we're kind of adding in that systems advocate to be a continuing, dependable person. Zanita loves to say person, and I love that too. Like it's their person to depend on to get them the resources that they need to get to their specific appointments, to get a safe place to stay for the night or something like that. So you can see on there, like the systems advocates, they're staying with people over time throughout every stage of their journey, from homelessness to permanent housing. So it's from the start when we see them on the street and all the way to permanent housing. And then that coordination, we're supporting people that, we're supporting people that are experiencing homelessness with a deep understanding of what they need to in order to navigate across systems. So what we're doing with hiring this workforce is hiring primarily folks who have experience in the system, like it's in some way or form, be it the carceral system, be it the homelessness system, be it the mental health systems, things like that. We're looking for those experiences so that they have that real lived experience to share with folks that are starting out in navigating these systems. We're building on the knowledge base that is already there rather than trying to recreate it. And then, yeah, there's a cool visual on the next slide, Naomi, if you could switch that. So it kind of shows the discontinuity here. You see that initial engagement. There's a lot of folks on the ground that are kind of like that first entry point into the homelessness system. They're outreach workers, the health clinic social workers. They are, yeah, you can see them all there. Regional access points, school-based case managers, things like that. And they are all kind of trying to get folks into that next level, which is shelter. And that's when they get case managers and working on different specific kind of long-term housing solutions. And after that, you can finally see there's like one pretty much case manager in permanent supportive housing, maybe even rapid rehousing as well, that a person has contact with. But all of those are different colors representing different people. And they aren't getting that kind of continuity that we're aiming for, that somebody can kind of fall back on, because not everybody understands the whole system just by being in it. They just want to have one person to reference at all times. So the next slide, Naomi, if you could switch that too, it kind of shows that view of it, and you can see that same color at every stage of the process. That's the systems advocate with the person experiencing homelessness and eventually not experiencing homelessness, going through the whole system as well. And that's what we're really seeing or wanting to kind of implement into the system. And I'll let Zanita, I know that you wanted to kind of talk a little bit about that difference between, a lot of folks are getting it confused. I think just upon initial messaging, we're still building out a lot of that messaging. The four of us have been at this work for 3 weeks now. So we're still building out a lot of that messaging, but one of the ideas that we're trying to work on is kind of differentiating that outreach, peer navigation, and what systems advocates are. So Zanita, if you want to take that away, you can too.
Yeah, so hi. Not to say that systems advocates are not peer navigators. The thing is, what we're trying to do is make sure that each person that is unhoused has a specific person with them that understands, you know, these systems, that can help them, help educate and advocate for them, understanding that these systems historically, even now, you know, that people of color, Black, Brown, Indigenous folks, you know, represent most of the unhoused population, and knowing we only make up 9%, you know, of the actual regular population. So having advocates and somebody that can move along with you through these systems, work with if you have a case manager, you know, but most of the time case managers have such a huge caseload, they're not able to really go into the field with somebody or accompany them to help advocate for them at an appointment, or when they're trying to fill out, you know, an application, because usually case managers have huge loads. Our advocates will have a caseload of no more than 10 to 15, depending on the acuity of our folks that we are walking alongside and helping them to navigate through these systems. Because we understand it's a full-time job to be unhoused, but if you have all of these other things and you don't have somebody there, people are getting lost in the cracks. And I know I've seen some things in the chat, you know, Bill saying it. If you are unhoused, in my mind, I picture, if you're unhoused and you need an advocate, it doesn't matter if you live in a car. If you don't have a home, you can get an advocate, you can get a person. So we don't want to leave anybody out, like nobody. So I just want to put that out there too to folks, is we just want to fill in the gaps so people can have that consistent, even after they get housed. Even after they finish their journey, wherever it is that they land, we're still there until they feel like I'm thriving and I can do this on my own and I don't need you anymore. So nobody is just dropping somebody, you know, we're still going to continue that engagement even after. But anybody in my mind that needs an advocate that is unhoused is eligible.
Yeah, I'd like to add
go
to
ahead.
that.
I was going to pass it to you anyways.
Yeah, you know, I think one of the things that I experienced having done this work for the last few years in Georgetown is that what happens when one of our clients, as like say for an outreach care coordinator, if I make an appointment for you at Swedish and all of your teeth are removed and we get you into a hotel for a while for you to recover from that, if I lose contact with you and the next time I see you is 6 months later and there hasn't been any progress in getting your dentures made. I mean, this is an example of somebody I just ran into because I actually participated in some of the studies that were done with the homeless surveys, and I went to Georgetown to do it because I miss my people down there. The gap that we are really gonna get to fill here is that when we hit the barriers that are in every one of the systems that we currently try to navigate with our clients, we will not only be able to try on a systems level to remove those barriers for everyone across the board, but we will be able to continue to navigate with that person, give them the encouragement that they need to continue pushing forward, continue to help them believe that they don't have to start back at zero. Because people, the despondency, the despair, the depression that keeps you from having any motivation is like there's no energy left after you're surviving, right? And to have somebody that is willing to give you that little extra nudge sometimes